Are you ready for more independence as a financial advisor? Consider the RIA model. Schwab Advisor Services has helped thousands of advisors make the move. To find your path, start with Schwab at advisorservices.schwab.com/paths today.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and thank you for joining me live here tonight. And I apologize for the audio. They've been making some changes here the last month or so on blogtalkradio.com, and unfortunately, it seems to have messed up the audio a little bit here. So my intro needs a little bit of fine-tuning, so I apologize for anybody's eardrums that may have gotten a little bit blasted here in the beginning. But anyways, we'll try and work that out as quickly as I can. But again, welcome to a great show tonight. I've got a couple of great professionals here waiting in the wings, and I'll bring them out here in just a second. But I want to remind everybody, of course, the broadcast is live every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that's 7 to 9 for those of you on the East Coast. And for those of you under Pacific Time, it'll be 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But welcome to the show, and if you're not familiar with where to find the link in that for the show, you go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, or you can just go to blogtalkradio.com, and up in the search key, you can just type in Golf Talk Live, and that'll bring you to the main page as well. And as I was explaining to the guys off air, once you get to the main page on blogtalkradio.com, it'll have the current show, which is what we're broadcasting now, at the top, and you are listening to it live. And then, of course, after the show, if you want to go down and listen to some of the previously aired programs, you scroll down a little bit on the page, and you'll see the on-demand section, and that's where you can listen to some of the previously aired programs as well. Lots of good stuff in the archives as well, so make sure. But we're glad that you tuned in tonight live here on this Thursday evening broadcast. Also, if you want to speak to any of the guests or myself during the live broadcast, you can do so by calling area code 646-716-4667. That's 646 area code 716-4667. Or you can email questions or comments to me personally at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And if you're interested in coming on the show, maybe you're a professional or somebody in the golf business and you think you might have something to share in the program, you can also reach out to me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. Also, get updates for the show on social media at facebook.com. Go to facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog. Make sure you have blog on the end there, and you get all the updates on the program as well as my personal page. And don't forget, while you're there on the Golf Talk Live blog page, that you throw a few likes my way as well. I appreciate you liking the page, and thank you for following me on Facebook. And also, you can get me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. That's CEO in capital letters. And thanks again for all of the new and recent followers on Twitter as well. And you can also visit the Golf Talk Live website at www.golftalkliveblog.com. And again, welcome to the show. We've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to start up here in just a second with Coach's Corner. Always like to start the program there, and I've got a couple of great professionals, as I said, and I'll introduce them here in just a second. And then a little bit later on in the show, I'm going to be joined by Chuck Evans. He's the Executive Director of Medicus Golf and also the owner of Chuck Evans Golf. He'll be joining me here in about an hour's time. Again, thank you for tuning in tonight. And again, first up is Coach's Corner. And I got a great panel tonight, Matthew Cook and David Lewis Maroney. And let me just tell you a little bit about each of them, and then we'll get them out here and start the discussion. Matthew, of course, has been on the show a number of times on the Coach's Corner panel, and he's a PGA coach, PGA certified both here in the U.S. and over in the U.K., and he's the co-founder of Leap Golf in the U.K. and also creator of Game Like Training. David, of course, is a first-time panelist on the show, the first time he's ever been on Golf Talk Live. That's David Lewis Maroney. And David, of course, has been teaching for 16 years plus. He's got a lot of experience from over 9 countries around the world. He's a native originally from New Zealand. And while he was over in New Zealand, he completed his professional golfer's apprentice back in 1997 and then played a little bit professionally on the Australian Sunshine Circuit, where he gained a lot of valuable experience and into the life, if you will, as a touring professional. And among his many accolades, of course, is his work with the David Ledbetter Academies, where he gained, again, some valuable knowledge. And it's with that knowledge and experience, both as a touring professional and also working through the David Ledbetter Academies, he wants to impart some of that knowledge that he's learned to his students as a senior coach at Bishopsgate Golf Academy. Guys, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for having us on, Ted. Appreciate it. It's always nice to speak to like-minded people. It's quite refreshing.
Yeah, it's not too often, and I know it's always good to talk. And where else can you talk some great golf and among some fellow golf professionals? Guys, let me start this off, and Matthew, just because you've been on here before, I'm going to start the questions with you, and then David.
Throw me under the bus.
What's that?
You're going to throw me under the bus.
Yeah, I'm putting you under the bus. That's right.
No, mate, I'm always on the other end. You can go first.
Yeah, I'll flip it around. Don't worry, guys. I'll flip it around. But Matthew, I want, just because you've been on here, a little bit familiar with the format that we've got here, I'll let you start off, and then David, what I'll do is allow you an opportunity to chime in here as well.
No problem.
Matthew, one of the things that I want to talk about is early specialization. I want you to explain a little bit about what that is, and then expand from there. And then, as I said, David will get you to jump in here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great topic. Great question. Early specialization. It's basically when juniors and students they tend to do just one sport too early in their life or their, I guess, career. You know, if they're playing a ton of different sports and then they choose one when they're very young, 6, 7, 8 years old, even younger, and they just specialize in one sport, it restricts them from the sort of fundamental movement skills that they'd need to learn. You know, things like simple throwing, catching, running, jumping, sprinting, all of the things that, you know, that you do as a young child when you're out playing in the streets, when you're on a skateboard or you're playing baseball or basketball or kicking a soccer ball. And early specialization is just choosing one too soon, and you limit yourself. You know, you just limit yourself too early on in life, so it becomes a detriment. And also the biggest thing with this, and I've just seen it way too often, and it almost happened to me. I fell out of love with the game at one point when I was younger because I kind of specialized too early, and you become bored of it. You've done it for so long, at such a young age. You just become fed up. And I've seen so many juniors just not enthusiastic with the game anymore. They don't enjoy it, and you know it's just been on them for too long and forced upon them for too long. So they end up, by the time they're 18 years old, because I'm from England, I've experienced the English culture much more than I have the American. But when
Sure.
people turn 18 years old, that's the legal limit or legal limit for illegal age for people to go out and drink alcohol or to go into nightclubs. And if these juniors, what I found, when they specialised too early, they became fed up and bored with the game. When they were 18 years old, they dropped out. and because of the legal age limits for drinking and going out partying, golf became almost non-existent, and a lot of talent wasted in my eyes just from specializing too early. Yeah.
That raises an interesting point. When I was growing up, of course, I'm originally from Canada, so we're actually all three of us originally from somewhere else at one point than here in the United States. But in the United States, more often than not, I believe it's pretty much around the board in all 50 states. I think the drinking age here is 21, but I understand the point that you're making. It varies from country to country. But David, Matthew raises an interesting point about specializing too early. Now, when I was growing up as a youngster, I played a lot of different sports. I played hockey, I played soccer, baseball, and there's a lot of advantages to doing that, not just the boredom factor, but also even for those that want to play golf a little bit later. Of course, I played golf at a very early age too, but it helped me with my coordination playing these other sports, especially sports like baseball and so forth. Do you agree with what Matthew was saying, that sometimes specializing too much in golf, and we certainly want to get juniors playing golf, we want to get them out there and having fun, but if they're not introduced and not allowed to sort of venture out to other sports or other activities besides just golf, he raises a valid point. Is that something that you've experienced as well when you were in New Zealand?
Probably not so much in New Zealand, but once I got out of New Zealand, certainly traveled around Europe, and probably the most I saw of it was when I taught in South Korea. Obviously, everyone knows how dominating South Korea is, especially in the women's game.
Right.
And what I experienced over there was just, I was really excited about going to work there because I did want to see what they were doing different than the rest of the world and what system they use. And it was just an unbelievable system where I had students within the golf academy where I was working, and we specialized just in junior development, and we had kids as young as 10 years old that didn't even go to school. They were just full-time in golf programs. So you get to a situation where when these kids are getting to a stage of turning pro, which could be at 18, at 19, they've more or less been playing as professionals since they're 10 or 11 years old, because these junior tournaments in Korea, they'll last for 5 days. And they'll start on a Monday, you have to qualify and get into the tournament, and then they'll play 3 rounds in the tournament, so it's a whole week situation. So they're more or less touring players, touring professionals, when they're still amateurs and at young kids. So, when they do turn pro, and a lot of the girls, you will find that time they're 21, 22, and certainly 23, they're ready to retire from the game. So, they've certainly lost the love of the game. They've just been doing it for so long that they've had enough of it.
Do you think, guys, and Matthew, I'll jump back to you here for just a second, but do you think part of the problem is that, we've seen here, and I'm going to use him as an example because I think he was very instrumental in sort of sparking or igniting that fire, if you will, with a lot of parents. But when Tiger Woods, of course, first came on the scene and everybody sort of learned his background and how he gravitated to golf, I mean, I'm sure he played other things as well, but golf was something that he really gravitated from an early age. That suddenly there was sort of this fire that was ignited, really a firestorm, if you will, and a lot of parents, that maybe saw a little bit of talent in their kid, sort of thrust it into that arena, and didn't really allow them the opportunity to decide if that's something they even really wanted to pursue, or if it was more the parents sort of living vicariously. Matthew, is that kind of along the lines of what you're explaining here? Is that not allowing them to, sort of branch out besides golf? That can be detrimental. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And I said I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, and I know we're golf coaches and I know we love golf. However, a young child's engagement in sports, because golf's a sport, as much as some people don't want to believe it, but it is.
Yeah.
Children's engagement in sport is not in the hope of a future potential Rory McIlroy or professional athlete. We need to, not direct so much focus on creating a major winner in every student. Rather, let them engage in the sport, have fun, and then allow them to make the decision themselves to which career they want to choose. But it's interesting you mentioned Tiger Woods. He played a ton of different sports when he was younger, and he didn't specialize too early. However, he played a lot of golf, but he also did a lot of gymnastic things. And
right.
his mother was interviewed, and there came a point where they had to sit down with Tiger. This is coming from his mother's mouth. There was a point where they sat down with Tiger and they asked him, "Look, Tiger, you're going to have to choose one now. You're playing so many different sports. It's
right.
getting to the stage where you need to choose one." And that's fine because he was engaged with all these other sports. He learned fundamental movement skills, gravitated more towards golf. He liked it. It was fun. But he played a ton of different things. So he became an athlete before he became a golfer. And I think some people get away from that sometimes. They whether it's they don't know, I'm not too sure of the reason, but yeah.
Well, Matthew and David, what it really says to me is this: as much as in the golf industry we want to certainly encourage newcomers to the game, and we want to certainly encourage youngsters, but not all of them are going to be tournament have tournament ability. Excuse me, is the word I'm looking for. And not all of them are going to be the next Tiger or Rory or what have you. But we certainly want to introduce them to the game at an early age, so that hopefully it will take in some fashion. Now, if they, as Tiger did, as you were just alluding to, Matthew, as Tiger did, there was a point after playing several different sports that he was really able to make that decision to sort of focus more on golf. But even if he hadn't have decided to play tournament golf, the bug probably would have bitten him enough that he probably would have played, and enjoyed golf later in years, which is really what we want in the golf industry. We want to introduce people.
Yeah.
David, what are some of the things that we really need to look at here in the industry, and sort of, and again, we're not trying to dissuade anybody if they have a solid interest, but at the same time, we have to be realistic and find a balance within the golf industry as well. So what are some things that we can do to sort of help with that process?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm not a great fan of the World Junior tournaments and things like that, especially starting kids that I think they even have now like a under 6 age group and stuff like that. I even had a student in Australia where I was recently teaching in Australia before coming to the US, and his father was, this kid's 5 years old, and his father was asking me questions about sending his kid over to the US to play in this World Junior tournament, and I'm not a great fan of those because that just puts more pressure, obviously, on a situation where you do want, parents are pushing their kids to become better and better because they can get in the world tournament, and win under 6. I mean, who cares if you win under 6, in my opinion. So I think we've got to be really careful with this type of tournament. I'm not a fan of those. I think, still we want kids to compete, but we want to have kids compete in a fun environment, and as Matt said, it's really important that we do have a system where kids, when they come into the game, it is a fun environment. They've got to learn fundamental movement skills, upgrade advanced TPI system as well, where, when you deliver a program, half of the time is spent on fundamental movement skills, and then the other half is sort of going into the golf skills, but then relates to the fundamental movement skills that we just learned as well. So if they're, whenever I did a pitching session, for example, the first thing I did is they learned how to throw some little balls into target areas, stuff like that. So they build on their awareness, so just control by throwing, and then build that into the pitching. So it definitely comes down to making everything fun and understanding that kids need to learn the fundamentals first through having enjoyment and learning to love the game before making it a competitive environment.
Exactly. David, I'm just going to mention one thing real quick, and I don't know if you're maybe outside or something, but we're getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if it's the wind or something that you might be going across your mic or across your phone, so you might need to turn or adjust, but I'm getting some feedback on that. So
sorry,
that's kind of
I had it on speaker, so maybe I'll have to put it to my ear.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, it's getting a little bit of feedback in here, so it cuts you out every once in a while. You know, one of the things that guys too, and then I want to move on from this. You know, Matthew, you raise a very interesting point. You know, again, I'm all for getting juniors involved in golf and having junior programs, and I don't even mind some of the junior tournaments. David, I know you don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a point that there, again, has to be a balance. And the way I look at it is this: up until, you know, Matthew raised the point of, you know, by the time they're 18, you know, they're maybe some of them have gotten burnt out. They've played so much golf. Maybe they have other interests, or they just want to go out and hang out, as you say, with their mates and have some fun and maybe a few drinks or what have you. The thing that the golf industry really has to look for is, yes, let's introduce them at an early age. Let's get them exposed to the game. But if we put too much pressure too quick to the point where they end up, by the time they're 18, they don't want to play anymore. Up until the point of 18, really, their mother and father or some other guardian is really paying for that level of play. So we want to run the risk of losing those golfing dollars later on because these kids are getting burnt out. So we want to make sure they're going to be coming back later in life. And I think there has to be, as I said, a balance somewhere within the junior programs, that we're not over stimulating, if you will, in just solely golf. As you said, that they're going to get bored and burnt out. And there are going to be a handful of them that are going to want to play as much golf as they can get. But the majority of you are right, Matthew. I think that a lot of them are going to find themselves burnt out too much and just dropping out of the game. And then we may not get to the point where they're going to want to come back.
Yeah. And we want to grow the game. We don't want to decline it, do we? So that's a very good point.
Yeah, and
I think
go ahead, David.
But I think, you know, that age group is, I mean, the same thing happened in New Zealand. I don't think it's just with the kids that have been, maybe early specialising. I think it's with all kids, with all sports, you know, when they get to that 16, 17, 18-year age, when they find alcohol, they find girls are more important than going hitting a few golf balls on the range or playing golf after school. Becomes a little bit more enjoyable to spend some time doing other activities. So that's obviously with all sports, with everything around that age group. But as you say, we've got to make sure that the game, they have built the love for the game before that happens, so that, as you say, they can still come back to it, or they've still got a bit of interest within that time frame of those years.
Yeah.
David, I'm going to start this one off with you, and I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk about training environments. And you raised an interesting point as well. You talked about when you went to work in South Korea, much different sort of atmosphere there. Talk about a little bit about the difference between some of the I guess and I hate to use this word, but training regime, if you will, that went on in South Korea, and how it differs from what you've seen here in the United States.
Probably the biggest thing was the junior tournament environment. I mean, where I grew up, I haven't, in the States, I've noticed it. I've only been in the States for sort of 3 months or so. And I have seen it at the junior tournaments here as well, where it's all on the score that you shoot, you know, to par, for example. Whereas where I grew up in New Zealand, most of the junior tournaments were not stroke events. They were more with handicaps and net events and a lot of match play, for example.
Right.
So in Korea, it was all, to par, and that even goes down to the younger ones, which were, you know, the 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And qualify for the tournament, you had to be shooting around a level par, even when you're an 8-year-old kid. Of course, they play on front tees, but the standard of golf was just phenomenal. And because it had a qualifying, you know, there'd be a junior tournament, and 3,500 kids would turn up for a tournament. So it just shows you the amount of kids, and out of that 3,500, 2,000 would be girls, and 1,500 would be boys. So there was only country in the world I've ever seen where you get more girls than boys playing.
Right.
But I think the regime is that it's all what you shoot. You know, you've got to shoot level par or under par, and they build that culture of shooting under par, and that just breeds better and better golf.
And why do you think, were you able to sort of ascertain when you were over there what the reasoning behind such a big influx of young girls wanting to get into the sport as opposed to boys? Was there a reason that you sort of come to understand when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, in Korea, it's certainly a very male-orientated society. So a lot of the high-paying jobs and a lot of the jobs, certainly males will have those jobs. So before the daughters, they get married and go off and have families and that, the parents certainly saw a situation where their daughter could earn some money, and a lot of money as well, obviously, before they do get married and have kids. So it was certainly driven by parents, by fathers, and how they saw a great opportunity for their daughter to get a good start in life.
Matthew, do you also think too, and I don't know whether how much exposure you've had there as well, but do you think that part of the reason the LPGA obviously has showcased many young ladies from South Korea and also from some of the other Asian countries as well, but do you think that because they've done such a really a great job of showcasing some of these international players like that has really sort of done kind of similar to what Tiger did in golf in general, spurred an interest among some of these young girls over there, thinking, hey, if Inbee Park, and I know she's not from, I don't believe from South Korea, but some of these other young Asian girls have done so well and really in many ways dominated for quite some time on the LPGA tour. Do you think that this has sort of ignited a little bit of fire with some of these young ladies coming out of South Korea?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you just said the exact word that I was going to use. It's the whole Tiger effect, and it's that. I think even psychologists refer to the term as ignition. And ever since, I think, was it you just mentioned Seri Park or was Inbee Park?
Inbee Park.
Inbee Park, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, if you remember reading Daniel Coyle's Talent Code, he mentions it in his book that it was ignition that changed almost, or ignited that whole part of the world, and they did a great job of showcasing it, and that's why there's so many more girls, women golfers. Or one of the reasons, anyway. I'm not as well versed with that culture as David is, but I'm guessing it's a big reason for the woman's interest in golf over there, and the sort of training environment has influenced the training environment over there. But yeah, it's similar to the Tiger effect. I mean, after realizing Tiger Woods is on the scene, and you see how cool he looked and what he did with a golf ball and some of the scores he was shooting, and then look at what Nike did to him. Nike exposed this amazing, talented golfer who looked cool at the time. He exposed him, which created a whole new world of golf in America. But you said it perfectly. Said ignition. That's what's done it, and it's heavily influenced the training environments.
Yeah,
to some degree,
we did it in Korea.
Yeah.
What would you like?
Some degree, to some degree, it's influenced it in a bad way, and in a lot of other ways, it's been good. But in some parts, it's influenced the training environment in a negative way, as well as positive. But there are a few negatives to it as well.
So keeping with this theme, guys, and Matthew, I'll let you talk a little bit more about this, and then David, I want you to jump back in as well. With respect to training environments, what would you like to see, both being relatively new here to the United States and obviously having a vast array of experience from around the world? You've seen a lot of different styles and different approaches to the game, and you've obviously had a taste of what you've seen over here. And obviously, the United States is still considered the biggest arena for golf in the world primarily because of the PGA, and obviously the LPGA as well. But are there things that you'd like to see differently, a different approach here in the United States as far as training than maybe what's going on now? Or is this, in other words, what are some things that you like that are going on, and what are some things that maybe you'd like to see change? Matthew, I'll let you go first, and then David, then jump in.
Well, from what I've seen, it's coming from England and being in America for a while now. From what I've seen and experienced, I see too much conformity and not enough individuality within with training golfers, whether it's a junior or whether it's someone that's 50 years old. We've become, this isn't everybody, because I do believe there is a shift. There is a shift happening. There are some incredible coaches out there that have this down to a T, but I think there's still a lot that are putting too much emphasis on a strict schedule regime and having everybody conform to that regime. When people are different from one person to the next. Even if you have two brothers, they're different. No one's the same. So our training systems have to account for that. So I would like to see more individuality within a framework. Yeah, but too much conformity needs to stop. It needs to go. It's not doing us any favors, and it hasn't done for the past 3 years.
David, do you think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, but what I'm hearing you say is that basically there's still too much of a one-size-fits-all approach to golf instruction out there, whether it be a methodology or whether it be a training system or whether it just be a repetitiveness, if you will, of certain ideology within the golf industry for everybody that comes onto the practice tee, and that's not necessarily what needs to happen. Certainly fundamentals need to be consistent to a certain degree, but again, even there's some tweaking there that can be done. David, is that what I'm understanding Matthew to be saying, and do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, well, I think golf coaching is going sort of in two different directions at the moment. You've got the guys, obviously, that a lot more on the science side of it in regard to obviously using the TrackMan and gears and all these sorts of 3D stuff. So there's a lot more guys sort of going in that direction where they're getting a lot more information than you've ever had before in regard to the golf swing. So they get very technical, all about the numbers. And then you've got other guys going the other way, more into motor learning. Okay, well, to transfer obviously what they've learned onto a golf course scenario, well, let's learn a different way than standing on a driving range and hitting 100, 500 golf balls to one target. So I think that we're going in sort of two different directions at the moment. And obviously the science guys believe what they're doing, and then obviously the motor learning guys believe in what they're doing. And eventually I think, hopefully we'll all work together and have a better understanding of the best way to train a student. But, personally, I think golf for a long time has been one of the worst practice sports there is in the world, just because you do train in a completely different environment than what you play. We practice at a driving range where most people have 100 golf balls in front of them, and you've got a wide open driving range with a few targets. And then they go and try to play on a golf course where you've got to hit one golf ball down a fairway with water on the right and OB on the left. So it's a completely different sort of mindset when you go onto the golf course. So, that is my passion about, creating a training environment where the transfer from what they learn in training can be effective onto the golf course as well.
Yeah, and you guys are both correct in your analysis, and this is something that I've talked about a number of times on the show as well, is, golf is not a one-size-fits-all. Yes, there are certain fundamentals that need to be adhered to, and obviously the club face can only be straight one way, can only be open one way or closed one way. But there's a lot of room for variance. Some people might need to play with a little stronger grip. Some people may need to, again, depending on their physical abilities, might need a little weaker grip, and somebody can play with a neutral grip. So there's a lot of variables that can be had, but each individual has to be approached that way. And you're right, David. One of the things that I've noticed when I was at the PGA show a couple of years ago, and I've made no bones about this, I'm all for technology. I think it's great. I think it can be, it can be, excuse me, a great asset when used in the appropriate manner. But one of the things that I've seen, as I'm sure you have, and I think that's what you were alluding to, is we're seeing a lot of people that are getting so wrapped up in the numbers and so wrapped up in the technology that they're forgetting that the student's standing there, and it's all about what the machine's telling them is wrong with this person's swing, instead of actually looking at the individual and sort of doing that assessment. And and also too, I think sometimes they're getting the students caught up in all of that as well, to the point where it's actually become confusing for the students. And I'm a firm believer, technology is there to assist and to guide and to help the coach or teach professional. It's not there to replace. And I think that some of them are again getting too involved. That's just my opinion. I'm not certainly an expert, but just from what I've seen and what I've heard in the industry, you're right. There's sort of two camps, if you will. At some point, they're going to be somewhere down the middle, and then there'll be something else that's going to come along and divide them apart again for maybe a few more years. But so guys, and Matthew, I'll go back to you. So what is maybe would you classify as appropriate training? What should we be really sort of formulating in our game plan, if you will? David, I think you touched on some of it, but Matthew, let's let you start the conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right. We just kind of touched on it, and David said it extremely well. With the appropriateness, really is practicing what you're going to be, which is the golf course, and appropriateness of training. In my eyes, there is that need to work on the mechanics of your golf swing, or whether it's the mechanics of something else where you can be on a driving range for an amount of time, and it's needed, it's required. You're not playing in a tournament for a while, or there are times for that, and it's needed at times. But appropriateness is for the individual scheduling that time appropriately. You can't just put 8 people in a group and then have everybody in one place when they're all on different schedules, and they're all doing the same thing when they're not actually doing the same thing. One has a tournament this week, one has a tournament in 6 weeks. One of them's a beginner, one of them's been playing for 3 years, the other one's about to turn pro. The appropriateness, again, it comes back to the individuality, not conformity. So appropriateness in my eyes and my belief is down to the individuals, I guess, where the individual is at, making sure training is appropriate to him or her at that time.
David, do you think it kind of equates to maybe somebody that's whether it be a mechanic or somebody that's maybe a carpenter, they've got the tools, they've maybe had some training, but depending on the level of training is going to be equated to the level of their ability. So the same as Matthew's pointing out, not everybody is necessarily going to be tour quality. Maybe somebody's a junior, or maybe somebody's a beginner, somebody's a more seasoned veteran of the game. And sort of to lump them all into the same bracket is not conducive to really in their best interest. So in your estimation, I know you're going to agree, I'm sure, a lot with what Matthew's just said, but in your estimation, what do you feel is a more appropriate approach to your training, what you want to accomplish when you're working with some of your students at Bishopsgate?
Well, certainly by watching them play first, most importantly, getting to see them out on the golf course, what sort of shots they're struggling with. So say, for example, they're struggling with a lob shot, just for example. Well, then, if they can't execute it out on the golf course, then we'd take them, obviously, back to the driving range. You discuss with them so they understand the concept of technically how you play a lob shot, what's got to be different with a lob shot technique. So once they really understand the concept, then you can move forward and now can you execute the skill in a training sort of situation where we'll put the ball up on the nice fluffy lie and maybe not make the lob shot too difficult, and they can sort of repeat the technique and make sure they can repeat it, and then you would then try to make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more like you'd experience on the golf course, so the lie wouldn't be maybe so good, and maybe the lob shot's a little bit more difficult. And once they're at that level, then, now you can take one to the golf course, and can you keep it out on the golf course now? And if they can't produce it again, then you just need to take them back another step and make sure they maybe just do a bit more repetition work on the practice area before they use it on a golf course. So, years ago, I remember you'd never try to play a golf shot out on a golf course that you don't feel confident with, and that's the same now. That if they can't execute it, then you've got to take them back and make sure they understand the concept first.
Well said, both of you. One of the things that I had a show this Tuesday morning, my other show that I do with LPGA professional Cindy Miller, which is called the Women of Golf Show, and we of course focus primarily towards the female market with that program. And we had an interesting guest. He's been on before, but we actually had him back again last week. John Stabler. He's the co-founder and co-owner of Golf Psych, and really focuses on more of the mental and emotional side of the game. And one of the things that he raised an interesting point, and I subscribe to this as far as in my teaching. One of the things I believe, especially with beginners, it needs to be as easy as possible for somebody, especially that's just starting out the game. It doesn't matter what age. Obviously, we want to work on fundamentals. We want to get them doing the right things. But I'm a big proponent of letting them tee it up for every shot, even in their practice session, just to build that confidence and give them, the feeling, because obviously it's much easier to clip that ball off a tee than it is to it can be very intimidating, especially for beginners. I'm sure you guys have all seen this. Hit, with their irons. And I'm not talking about the woods, that's a whole different issue, but especially with their iron shots, and especially for newer players that have never been exposed to the game, we need to make it as simple as possible for them to start out, and then sort of, as you were talking about, David, sort of inch them back, if need be, into some of the more proper techniques. But I think to give them that confidence initially, because there's nothing worse than being out on the driving range or out the practice tee, and you've got somebody, a seasoned coach there, and they're trying to, or a seasoned teach professional, and they're trying to, show you the fundamentals, and you're trying to hit something off the ground that you've never hit before, and 9 times out of 10, especially if they don't have a lot of athletic ability, that they're going to struggle a little bit, and it's very daunting and very intimidating. So I like to use that teed-up approach, as John had talked about earlier in the week, and giving them that sort of sense of confidence building, if you will. Is that something that you guys try to, not necessarily the same thing, but try to do something that is going to help build their confidence right from the get-go? Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah,
you
for
first.
sure. Yeah, I remember doing that back in the UK when I was teaching a lot of the women, a lot of the lady members, because they struggled, and mostly they were members because they liked to come up on a Tuesday morning and a Sunday afternoon to have tea and toast. That's, they weren't too bothered about the golf, but so that a lot of them were beginners, and they started having golf lessons, and you find you have to. I'm going back to that word again, but you have to make it appropriate for them. So you stick the golf, but you find yourself at the time I was a lot younger, and I was a lot less. I had a lot less experience, and you're out there and you're like, geez, how can I get this lady, or might not have been a lady, it may have been any other beginner. How can I get this beginner to get the ball in the air so they feel good, or so they like it, so they enjoy it, so they'll come back next week? And you think, oh yeah, put the golf ball on a tee, and because they can't hit the ground, they can't get into good posture. Stick the ball on a tee, and there you go. They'll hit it, and they'll feel great. But you make it appropriate, make it easier for them. Like, I used to love it in the winter when we had the winter greens, and the holes were huge. Yep. Because we'd go out on the golf course, we'd tee up like halfway down the fairway, so a par 5 just turned into like a par 4 or par 3 for us. And then they'd hit to a green that had a huge hole, so we made it a lot easier. But I'm going to go back to that same word again, Ted. Appropriate. It was appropriate for that person at that time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't
I think it's important, and there's a lot of differences in styles, and I think there's a lot that can be learned, as what you were alluding to earlier, Matthew, about the sort of one size, and we see a lot of, early in the earlier specialization, as you talked about, people sort of being thrusted into one thing, and obviously we're talking about golf. There's a lot of different things out there, and there's a lot of different techniques and styles, and I think that we have to look at them all and find what's appropriate, as you both have alluded to, for the individual that you're dealing with. And everybody is different. It doesn't matter whether you bring people from the same family or not. They may have certain similarities, but they're each individual beings, and they're going to approach things differently. And they may gravitate and do things very similar, but more often than not, they're going to be different enough that they can be approached a little bit differently, and that really needs to be up to them. And I think a coach needs to be more responsive that way, and not certainly we need to help guide and move them in a direction if need be at times, but I think we also have to be reactive to what they're wanting to accomplish, because not everybody wants to play on the PGA or LPGA tour. They want to just go out there and have fun, and that's the ultimate thing. Guys, I wanted to ask you each a question, because you have had obviously a lot of international experience. David, I'm going to start with you. You've had the pleasure of working in multiple different countries, seeing a lot of different styles, a lot of different approaches to the game. What are some things that you've seen elsewhere, other than here in the United States, that really caught your eye, that you liked and thought, this was something that I would like to continue on in my teaching, as I progressed through my career? Some things that you saw that were, impressed you, and not necessarily referring to specific a player or anything, but just something that you saw, happening elsewhere that you want to try and incorporate here in the United States.
I was thinking of something else, not quite in the United States, but I mean, things that I really did like when I worked mainly in Europe, and places like when I first moved to Slovenia, for example, is where I experienced it first, is that and they have it in a lot of European countries where you need an actual license to play on the golf course. So,
right.
You can't just turn up to a golf course and tee it up and play. You need to present a driving license to say that you're at a certain standard of golf that you can play the game, but not a great level we're talking. But the thing I liked about it is that each student wanted to play had to learn and go have lessons first. So, and it was very structured. There was also a rules component involved with it as well. So they learned the etiquette and the basic rules of losing the ball, etc. So anyone that started the game got some good advice right from the start, and also the golf pro would obviously take them out on the golf course to prepare them for their test, and the golf pro would take them for their test as well. So that I thought was great. You get a situation, anyone that learns gets good advice, learns the fundamentals first, and they can then progress after that. That's certainly something that I would take to anywhere around the world. I think it's a great system.
Yeah, I think there has to be, and it's not that we, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I agree with you. I think that, I'm sure there might be some that would be against it because they want to be able to get as many people out there as possible, and some people might be a little bit apprehensive if they have to go for a test, let's say, or go through some sort of a licensing process. But, one of the things that I like about that is the fact that for those that really want to learn and understand the game, there's a process to go through. And one of the complaints that I've always had, and I'm more than happy to let anybody come out and play, but you touched on it, etiquette. There is a certain etiquette that needs to be adhered to when you're out in the golf course. You need to be respectful and considerate of other players out there. And when you're somebody that's new to the game and doesn't understand the rules and things like that, for instance, picking up your golf ball after a reasonable number of strokes, if you're not a good player, in order to keep play moving, that's something that really has not been talked about very much in teaching. We've brushed against it, but I mean, how many coaches or how many teachers are actually really getting into that part of it? They're more into swing fundamentals and things like that. But how many are actually out there teaching etiquette and what to do and what not to do when you're out in the golf course?
Yeah, obviously very, very little, I would say. And also, have they got access to the golf course to be able to do that? A lot of the time, the golf course is obviously very precious of their tee times, and they don't want just coaches taking students out and getting in the way, for example. But for sure, it's a huge element, and I see it a lot with students from different countries that they haven't got the etiquette. They don't understand what the game's all about, and they don't understand sort of the traditions of the game as well. I mean, obviously we want to grow the game, but we play golf because we grew up watching Greg Norman and guys like that, and wanted to play golf because of these guys. Where a lot of these other countries have never, they don't have any golf professionals that they can look up to because they've only been playing the sport for such a short time.
Right, exactly. And Matthew, I'm sure you would probably agree along that, but what about some things that you've experienced maybe while you were back in England that you're sort of gravitating to a little bit more, or maybe that you would like to see different here, or in addition to what's currently going on?
But it was, I experienced this in the UK at Pete Cowan's Golf Academy. Mm-hmm. And Pete works with a lot of great players, and his academy, it really is incredible. Some of the things that he has on the facility are great, and it was he created a very, very much a game-like situations everywhere, whether it was on the range, undercover, because in England the weather's bad most of the time, so
sure.
You'd spend a lot of time on the range, but there was still so many elements of making it game-like. Lots of targets, lots of different fairway strips, anything to make it more like the game in the short game area. And what I found was that these guys they're actually taking note of what the players are doing in the practice. They're keeping a track and a record of some of the scores they're making in games in practice. They're taking into account more than what I've ever seen before in practice. And I gravitated to that because it goes in alignment with my beliefs and what I value in learning. And that's what I've tried to take on, more of a role in practice. And what are you doing in practice? How are you measuring it? How do you know if you're getting better? Rather than just taking statistics from a round of golf in a tournament, let's take some statistics in practice and let's see if you're actually going on the right route. So I
Sure.
took away from Pete Cowan back in the UK the more of the practice side of it.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I think that any time, and this is something that we've been hearing a lot, and I'll certainly more than happy to say it again, you have to practice with a purpose. And I think for a long time, most amateurs particularly didn't really go and practice with a purpose. And we talked about this as well on previous shows, and here recently on my other program, Women of Golf Show on Tuesday, we talked about this, the sort of rake and hit mentality out in the driving range. And that's what a lot of people do, and that's why they really don't get any better, is they're just hitting ball after ball, and they're not really, thinking about the shots. They're not visualizing, potential scenarios while they're on the practice range. And that's something that I think a coach or teacher professional can help, regardless of what level of player. Even the top players, when they're going out there, it might look like they're raking a ball over and they're hitting it, but I can guarantee you they're going through their routines each and every shot on that practice tee before they go out and play a round of golf. They're obviously getting more serious when they're actually in a full-blown practice session with their coach or even on their own. But when they're out there getting ready to play, whether it be a U.S. Open or a British Open, and they're on that practice tee, they're thinking about potential shots they're going to be faced with. So you'll see them hit some knockdown shots. You'll see them hitting different ball flight trajectories as well, left and right, fade or draw, depending on what the scenario may call for. And they're doing the same thing when they get in the bunker. They're visualizing the potential shots. They're not just hitting ball after ball for the sake of hitting it. So this is something that, we need to help the public understand, I think, as teaching professionals and as coaches, that they need to practice with purpose.
I think the way I like to teach it to my students is it's making sure that every ball that they hit, what's the intention of that golf ball, and I like to break it down into 4 different areas. So they're either doing some repair to their golf swing. So when they're doing repair, and as you spoke about in a different topic, I like to tee it up when they're doing their drills. Because the intention of when you're doing a drill or making a change to your golf swing is not to see the ball fly beautifully down the driving range. It's to make a fundamental change to their golf swing. So generally when you make a change, you're going to get a different result, and normally that different result is going to be worse. So we teed up them to give them a little bit of more room for error. Once they've done some work on repair, then they've got to bring in an element of repetition, because to get good at anything, you need to repeat it, for sure.
Sure.
And then once they've got some repetition and they can play the shot reasonably well, then you've got to make it into more of a random style practice. So more like your golf course, you hit one ball with a driver, and then the next ball will be a 7-iron, and then the next one will be a pitching wedge, and all the different targets. And then last of all, tournament style training. So, playing with your mates. When you were a kid, you'd always get around the green and have up and down challenges or stuff like that. So building all those elements into your training, what's your intention with this golf ball? Is it to hit it lovely? Or is it to play, get a shot against your mates? You got to really understand what you're trying to achieve with that ball.
Yeah,
right.
And you know what?
Well
You can go back. You can go back far with this. Like the John Jacobs, he used to give 15-minute golf lessons, and because
right.
I mean, how quickly can we see something wrong in a swing? And sometimes we're wrong with what it is, but now we have technology to maybe tell us what's wrong or influence our decisions, or we can get the information for what needs to change in the swing quite quickly. John Jacobs used to give 15-minute golf lessons, but when he'd spend time working with people, he had short game challenges. He had up and down challenges around greens with national teams. They had to hold a 3-iron, and they had to get up and down from each place before they left the practice green. More time was dedicated towards what they were doing in practice, not necessarily standing on a range of breaking balls. So this goes back way before us. It's
Sure.
We just need to see the change quicker, I guess.
Well, I think I think that some of the pros that like John Jacobs and some of the others that have been out there for years and years, some of their teaching styles reason they were very effective is because they had, as you talked about, Matthews, that game-like training where they really created scenarios in their practice sessions, whether it be short game sessions and things like that, or whether it be the full swing. They tried to create real-life situations for their students in order for them to be able to visualize and execute the shots. And as you said, not just having them hit balls on a driving range for the whole time. Especially when John Jacobs did some of his schools. I mean, you might be for a 3-day or whatever school. Excuse me. There was a lot of real-life situations, obviously, when he took you out in the golf course. But during some of those sessions, he broke them up into groups depending on how many were participating. But there were real-life situations that he would create in order to, help you visualize and not just staying there hitting a bucket of balls. That doesn't really accomplish anything. So, guys, some great discussion, and I've got probably a couple more minutes here, so let's just end with this. Obviously, there's differences between your traditional club golfer and obviously the touring pros. We've talked a little bit about that, but Matthew, I'll let you go first, and then David will let you finish up. But what are some of the differences that we see between our club golfers and our touring pros, and why are the touring pros seem to have so much more success? What is it they're doing differently that maybe the club pro out there, or club golfer rather, could learn from? Matthew?
Well, one thing, I mean, there's tons of things that they do differently, but one major thing I believe is that the touring professional can manage his or her game around many different golf courses, in many different conditions, with many different situations. However, the club pro, they can only tend to manage their game around their own golf course and struggle at any other golf course. So it's they really struggle to manage their own personal game at any other golf course, and that's one of the biggest differences, I believe, to the club pro to a touring professional, is that they get much more success because they can go to another golf club, across the world and kind of shoot the same score. Whereas you see golfers, the pro at any one golf club, and he'll go out on club championship or whatever tournament it is that weekend, and he'll shoot a 69 or, he'll shoot a couple under. But then when he goes to play, let's say, for example, the British Open qualifier, he throws in a 90 or an 85 because he can't manage his own game and his own emotions within his game at another golf course in a different situation. I think that's the biggest reason. There's many others, but that, I believe, is probably one of the biggest.
Yeah, and David, I'm sure you would agree with that as well. Any other differences that you see that maybe some of the amateurs out there that are listening could pick up some tips on?
I mean, I think probably it comes down to a little bit more of their short game. These touring pros have just got the most unbelievable short game that any situation they can get the ball close. They've just got total control, workability of the golf ball. I think, you see a lot of good club pro golfers, for example, as well, that strike the ball really well. But just that ability to stick it close around the greens all the time is one of the major difference between that sort of level of golfer.
Yeah, and I would
work
agree.
Hard on the short game.
Yeah, I agree. And can't emphasize enough. Work hard on the short game. And when you do practice, make sure you always practice with purpose. Guys, unfortunately, our time has come to a close. And David, I want to thank you particularly for joining us tonight. Matthew, I know you've been on here before, but David did a great job for your first time on here. And I would love to have I would love to have you come. Yeah, I'd love to have you come back, and we'll get into some further discussion and have some other interesting topics to put out there. But you guys did a great job. David, I'll let you go first. If you want to just give a quick plug for what you're doing, and if those tuning in are interested in getting involved with you or getting connected with you, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, well, I'm a senior instructor at the Bishopsgate Golf Academy, which is based sort of 40 minutes out of Orlando. We mainly specialise in taking students from that sort of 14 to 18 range and building their golf abilities to a stage where they can maybe get a golf scholarship into colleges. So, any parents that have got kids that are showing an interest in the game and maybe would like to play college golf, then certainly look us up.
Very, very well said. And Matthew, for those that are tuning in that want to reach out to you, how can they go ahead and do that?
Yeah, they can contact me on Facebook, Matthew Cook, or Twitter, _Cook, #1. Or they can just go to the website, GameLikeTrainingGolf.com. Everything I talk about, everything I believe, everything, all the tools I use and the resources that I have, they're all on the website. They're all free. You can just sign up and you can get it all for free. My email address is cookmatthew500@gmail.com. Yeah, that is, and social media is huge these days, so type in my name, you'll find me somewhere.
And hopefully working hard, as always, on the golf course. Guys, again, thank you very much for coming on Coach's Corner, on Golf Talk Live's Coach's Corner tonight. Always enjoy these discussions, and I know that not only the amateurs get something out of this, some of the players out there, but also I know a lot of the other coaches and teaching pros out there that tune into the show. It's a great way to exchange information and thoughts and views, and certainly the views and thoughts that are expressed on the program are just really there to help and not necessarily to put down any one methodology or anything like that. But we have to have discussion in this industry, and it has to be rational discussion and honest discussion, because ultimately we want to continue to grow this game and to help increase those numbers. And I think the way to do that is for us to have some good, healthy debate discussion on the program and see if we can help a few players out there as well. So thanks, guys, for jumping in tonight. And I look forward to having both of you on future panel discussions. And always welcome to come back here on Golf Talk Live. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us on, Ted. Appreciate it.
All right, no problem. We'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was, my very special guest, Matthew Cook. As I mentioned, been on here a number of times on the program on Coach's Corner. And new to the Coach's Corner panel tonight, of course, was David Lewis Moroney, originally from New Zealand. And he's, as he talked about, is working now as a senior coach at Bishopsgate in down in just outside of Orlando. So some great discussion tonight. Talked about a few different things, and particularly always about growing the game. But now we're going to move into another gentleman that's been on the show. He's been on the Coach's Corner panel, and actually did an interview with him my first year doing the show, Mr. Chuck Evans, who's really very well known throughout the golf industry. He's the Executive Director of Medicus Golf and also the owner of Chuck Evans Golf. Let me just tell you a little bit more about him. He's a Golf Magazine Top 100 teacher in America, and also Golf Digest Top Teachers in America instructor for the PGA, LPGA Champions Tour nationwide, which of course is now the, I believe, web.com, and also to a number of top amateurs. He's authored several national golf articles for Golf Magazine, Golf Digest, Golf Tips, and also the author of the book, How to Build Your Golf Swing. He's also the co-creator of 5 Simple Keys, and we're going to talk about that tonight here on Golf Talk Live. So let me bring Mr. Chuck Evans onto the program. Good evening, Chuck. Welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hey, Ted. How are you?
I'm doing well. And Chuck, I want to thank you for doing this program tonight. I know that you're in, I guess, recovery mode. You've recently had some surgery, as I understand, correct?
Yeah. They were not genuine GM parts, but they are replacement parts. So.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. I know sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable doing that, but I appreciate you stepping up and doing the program, and always look forward to having you on the show, and would love to have you on even more. Chuck, I wanted to give you an opportunity tonight to come on and talk a little bit more about really your principle, if you will, or your theory of the 5 simple keys and what they are. And you've done such a fantastic job of really getting them out there over the years. You've been teaching here for a long, long time. And I wanted to kind of go through each of them a little bit and let you explain a little bit more why you feel they're so important to playing some good golf. So let's start with number 1, which is what? The 5 simple keys.
Well, we call it a steady head. Steady doesn't mean non-moving. It just means very little translation. As we started studying the greatest players going back 100 years, we found these 5 commonalities. And so, if somebody can come up with a 6th one, we'll certainly look at that. But all we could find was 5. So, but the steady head is basically, we know the head is going to move. In fact, research by Phil Cheatham and AMM 3D Body Mechanics shows that the best players in the world, their head moves about an inch back in the backswing, so to the right for a right-handed player, and then they'll move slightly downward in the downswing. So when we say steady, that doesn't mean non-moving.
Right.
But most players move their head. Most players that have issues move their head significantly off the golf ball, and better players actually, once they move their head significantly to the right, actually stay back during the downswing. And higher handicappers, once they move significantly to the right, have a tendency to move much more forward of their starting position in the downswing. So, it's okay to have a little head movement. You just don't want a lot of up and down nor a lot of side to side.
And what, Chuck, is one of the causes, do you think? Obviously we'll talk about the tour player in a second, but with a lot of the amateurs, you're right. When I see it as well on the practice tees, and then I see a lot of amateurs that really tend to sway into their backswing. They're not really turning into the backswing. They're swaying more, and you'll see their head will move 3, 4, and plus inches. Is it because obviously they're swaying into the backswing as opposed to making a good solid turn?
Well, if they have a hip sway, their head won't move to the right typically. What we see is an upper body sway to the right. They're trying to get their upper body. They feel like what they have to do is put the pressure into the right side, and they do that by moving their upper body over there. And the pressure has to go into the right side from the pelvis area up through the legs. So they're just using the wrong pieces to move over there. They're using the upper body instead of the lower body to add a little pressure there.
So in order to initiate, then, if you're working with, let's take a newer student. Obviously, let's again, we'll set aside the touring professionals here for a little while because they've obviously got it down a little bit better than the rest of them out there. But let's say you're working with a new golfer. What is something, obviously, you're going to be looking at to watch where their head movement is, and that's going to tell you a lot of things from that alone. Obviously, you're going to look at the ball flight and stuff, but initially when you're looking at that student and you're seeing their heads moving, what are some of the first things that you're going to look at?
Well, we're going to look and see what is the cause of the head movement. So that's where we would start. And the beauty of the 5 simple keys is, we look at the area that, out of those 5 keys, which one we prioritize it. So which one can fix the most other pieces? And in many cases, let's say it's a steady head. In many cases, if their head's moving all over, if we fix that, it helps align some of the other 4 keys that are left. So what we'll do is we'll have them just stand up and take their golf posture from a vertical position, standing straight up. We simply have them turn into their right hip and then bend forward from their waist, and right there they see their head doesn't move. And we didn't initiate it with the upper body. We just initiated it with the lower body. Another thing we like to do is once they are at address, we'll take a club or anything, we'll put it pretty much at the center of their chest, but just down below the sternum. And we'll show them now that if you get your shoulder to here, that's 90 degrees. So I have them turn their shoulder to the rod. And again, it's a different feeling because they're not loading up their upper torso back outside their right foot. So it's mainly a matter of just educating them on which piece or pieces and what their job is. So if you can get a player with a pretty sound pivot, you can build and go a pretty long ways. You can have somebody that has great hands and a faulty pivot, and they're not going to be nearly as good because the hands can only make up for so much motion that's being put on them that might be faulty.
You know, Jack Nicklaus obviously always talked about his head when he worked with Jack Grout, of course, in earlier years. You know, he talked about how Jack used to grab on his hair and make him hit golf shots like that. Well, that was really, again, to sort of further this principle, was that he wanted to make sure that Jack was keeping his head steady and was really sort of turning around. Now, obviously, things have changed in the approach to the golf swing in more modern times. We don't see too many coaches grabbing the hair of their students, but it was to prove a point, correct?
It is, and today when they're working on that, a lot of coaches will put a shaft or a stick to the side of the player's head and have them feel it just stay against that stick.
Yeah,
so
and that
it's the same premise. You're just not grabbing the hair.
Right. Now, obviously, one of the other components, or one of the other 5 keys, if you will, is moving the weight forward in its proper sequence. So talk a little bit about that. Explain what you mean by weight forward, and how do we know if a player, and I'm asking from a coach's perspective as opposed to the students. The students, obviously, the reason they're coming to us is because they don't understand all this. So let's explain it and break it down a little bit. What do we mean by weight forward, and how does that happen?
Well, weight forward simply means more pressure on your target side, leg, hip, knee, and foot at impact. The reason we use weight forward is because the golfing public understands weight forward. They don't understand pressure. So, and those two aren't the same unless they're in a static environment. Once they start moving, it's all about pressure and not about weight, which gives another fallacy to the average player when they hear someone talking about weight. Again, going back to steady head, that's what they see. They feel like by moving their chest way over to the right, that's moving their weight. And it is, but we're trying to move pressure and interact with the ground through the feet. So the weight forward ideally should have been called pressure forward, but again, from a educational standpoint, the golfing public wouldn't have known what that meant. So what we do when we see a player is we have pressure maps, and we can see how much pressure is going, when and where and how much, and the rate that it's going. So if we see a player that has balance issues, or even you could even see it with the naked eye if they're not getting their pressure forward enough, we will use a pressure map and we will do training drills just to get them to feel that pressure moving, into their target side, foot, knee, and hip. So, there's an old book, Golfing Secrets by Wild Bill Melhorn, where he talked about in the backswing, he would have students pick their left foot up, and then to start the downswing, they'd plant the left foot and then pick the right foot up. Well, that's a feel of getting the pressure going back and forth between your feet.
Right. Right, exactly. Now, obviously, there's an optimal pressure, if you will, and it's going to vary. There's, I guess what you would call an acceptable range. Let's talk about what the better players, what that pressure, if you will, is, and what we too often see in the amateurs. Why there's such a difference, and explain what the difference is.
Yeah, well, the pressure range, and again, we collected a lot of data from Swing Catalyst, and got into their database to see what was going on. And the best players in the world have anywhere between 70 and 90% increase of pressure toward their forward foot at impact. The higher amount with the shorter irons and the lower amount with the drivers and tree woods. The amateur usually will start down with somewhere between 70 and 90 on their target side foot, but well before the club gets down to halfway, they're already backing up and putting that pressure back on the back foot. So they're coming into impact about 50-50 and sometimes 60-40 on the back.
Right.
So that leads to a couple other issues. Number one, the head's moving around, and then it ruins what we call key number 3, which is a inline club shaft. If your weight's falling backwards at impact, you have to try to flip the club face to even get to the golf ball. So now that ruins that left arm club shaft relationship.
And so let's explain that for those that maybe don't understand what you were just saying with respect to the third key, obviously the flat, which is also the flat left wrist, as you call it. Explain to what you mean by an inline club shaft.
Well, inline simply means there's a straight line running from your target side shoulder straight down through your arms, hands, shaft, down to the club head. So if you have too much, let's say the club head is going past your hands. Well, now that club shaft's in line with your right arm. So that would mean that it's pointing left and you're adding loft to it. Then you'll see people that have what we call an arched left wrist, which is your left wrist really rounded off, kind of like Dustin Johnson's is at the top of his backswing, the Lee Trevino.
Yeah.
And when they're coming through the ball, that arching, that again is an out-of-line condition, but it's a good way to practice to keep them throwing it around the other way.
Yeah, and this is something that a lot of people, I think, misunderstand. You see when you're out in the practice range and that you see a lot of different, swing types and things, which is fine, but the basics and the fundamentals, if you will, have to be the same. Like you gave it a good example, Lee Trevino and Zach Johnson. Clearly different swings than what you might see a Rory or a Tiger, but essentially the key elements of their swings are all the same, correct?
Yes, I mean, and again, that's what we looked at. We looked at players going back 100 years, the game's greatest players, and they all had those commonalities. Now, some of them had a little more the inline shaft or flat left wrist. Some of them had a little more than that, but they all fell within those categories. So, and again, we looked hard to find a lot of things that might be, similar. And we couldn't find any more than 5, and that was through years of looking at swings and research and talking with, the 3D people on the like the AMN, Phil Cheatham, and those people. And it took years of research to find all that and just say, okay, well, these are our commonalities. So again, we weren't looking for 5. We didn't care how many there were. We just wanted to know. We just wanted to know how many there were.
Right. Now, we know that obviously golf, unlike many other sports out there, it's not played on a vertical or horizontal plane. First off, explain what the term plane means for those that aren't familiar, and also how golf is played a little bit differently than maybe, say, baseball or something else. Why is it different? Why is that important to playing good golf?
Well, there are multiple planes in golf, but the most referred to is for the average golfer is what the club shaft is doing, and in reality, it's called kind of what's called a functional swing plane. It's where the club is at the last parallel coming down until the next parallel through impact. So that's going to have a movement of where that sweet spot and club head are moving, and you can describe it as a club shaft plane, but then your shoulders, your hands, your knees, everything else goes on a plane too, or on a path. But because clubs are angled, that's more like the pitch of a roof, with the gutter being the target line. So that would be on what's called an inclined plane instead of a vertical or horizontal plane like a floor or a wall.
Right. And
so we spend a lot of time just trying to match up. In fact, we spend a lot of time taking a lot of stuff out that the players don't need, that they think they need. So we're actually reducing motion instead of adding motion in most cases.
Right. Now, the final one, obviously, Chuck, is the ability to control the club face. And that's obviously probably one of the most important parts. I mean, obviously, they all work together, but that's probably one of the most important because where the club face points is obviously where the ball is going to go. Talk about how you control and the importance of that club face control.
Right. Well, let's back up to key 4, which is the sweet spot path.
Sure.
And a path obviously is different than a plane. The path is the direction that the club head is traveling on. It can travel, numerous degrees to the right, numerous to the left, or straight down the target line. What makes a ball curve is the difference between the face and the path relationships. So the ball will always curve away from the path. So by and large, the ball primarily will start where the club face is pointed at the point of impact.
Right.
So hypothetically, and without getting too much in detail, if you can imagine laying a shaft on the ground, and then take another shaft and point it, 2 to 3 inches to the right of your target line. Then take another shaft and point it 2 to 3 inches to the right of that middle one. Now you've got the path of the club head, the direction of the club face, all relative to a target line. So
right.
With the description I just laid down, the first club that's pointed slightly right of target would represent your club face. So that's where you would aim your club face to get the ball started. So if you're going to draw it, that means the path, the club head, would have to swing farther to the right than the face. So that's when you lay down the third shaft. So you can do that via, if you're going to draw it, or if you're going to fade it, you just work it the opposite way. But players need to understand that if you're going to draw it, the path has to be farther right than the face point. And if you're going to fade it, the path has to be farther left than the face is pointing at impact. And that's about as simple as it gets. There's a lot of old school stuff. It says aim your club where you want the ball to end up, and then aim your body where you want it to start. And there are still players on the Champions Tour that do that, and they have great success with it. That's their thought, but in reality, if you did that, you'd hook it off the planet, so it wouldn't be playable. So what they think they're doing, what they're really doing, are two separate things.
One of the interesting things that we talked about a little bit earlier on the program with the guys on the panel, and Chuck, I know you've been on the panel discussions before in that, and one of the things that we talked about is technology, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and this is not to discredit anything or I certainly don't want to put down anybody's technology, but do you think from what you've seen and what you've observed that sometimes having that technology has actually been a hindrance in golf instruction, whereas it should be more of a, we obviously have that technology there. It gets certainly good information can be made available, but do you think that maybe in some case it's being overused to the point that it's actually becoming more of a hindrance for the players. And I'm not talking the tour players. I'm talking the young up and comers that want to get out there and learn to play this game, that they're getting too wrapped up in the technology.
Well, the key word you said in there was young players wanting to play the game. So to play the game is totally different than teaching someone the game as far as the swing and all the physical movements. So, we don't use any technology on the golf course when we take players to the course, because we're trying to get them to play golf.
Right.
Learn how to score, learn how to set up your shots. We do on all of our new players, everybody that comes in, we take and we get their 3D radar numbers with flight scope. We then get their 3D body motion numbers.
Sure.
We use high-speed cameras. I mean, we use everything to get their basic information, which now gives us a direction, and it ties into the 5 keys, because all of these pieces of technology tie into the 5 simple keys as well, because they all relate to one of those keys. So I think that a lot of the younger teachers are totally enamored by the technology. And I've seen teachers sit behind their computer and never get up and move a student or get them the field, just say, no, you need to swing 3 more degrees to the right. Well, if he told me to swing 3 more degrees to the right, I wouldn't have any idea how far that was. And I'm pretty sure nobody else would either.
Yeah, and that's really the point. And again, it's not, I think, and I'm all for the technology. I think it's great. I think some of the stuff that's out there is incredible, very interesting. But I agree with you, I think that there are some out there, and we see this all the time. You just have to look in some of the different golf groups on Facebook and other social media. There's always discussions about this, technology versus that technology. And some of the discussion certainly is very informative and interesting, but there's also a lot of, I think, squabbling that ends up going on as well, because there are some that rely too heavily on it. And as you said, they're not even getting up out of their seat to really engage with the student. It's more of a command, if you will. So let me ask you, Chuck, when you're working with a new student, what are some of what's the first thing that you do? If somebody walks into your facility and says, okay, Chuck, I want to get help with my golf game, what are some of the first steps that you take in order to bring that student in?
Well, what we do, first put them through an assessment. And that assessment consists of, after we've gone through a little question and answer period, find out what their goals are, what their physical limitations are, what their practice habits are going to be, and what they currently are. And then based on all of that, then we go through an assessment, which considers or which envelops getting their ball flight numbers, getting their body numbers through 3D measurement, getting short game assessment, and then we do a physical assessment, see what their body can and can't do. And so once we've done all that, then based on what we talked about in our question part of it, then we help build a program for their improvement.
Right. And once that assessment's been done and you've now got a game plan, what's sort of the next step from that point?
Well, and again, depending on what they told us, their goals and aspirations are, depending on their practice schedules, we'll start working on the area, depending on somewhere within those 5 keys, that's going to greatly affect the most other keys. So let's say they had a faulty pivot, they don't get their head moving around everywhere. We're going to work on steady head drills. If they have not getting enough pressure forward, we're going to work on pressure forward drills. And we'll only work on 1 key at a time. And when they finally get all 5 keys, our work is done then. They're just in maintenance mode.
Right. Now,
they don't get them real quick, depending on their handicap level. Even the best players in the world, who you would think master all 5 keys, really don't, because the one that they have, the one they had the biggest issue with is pump face control.
Right.
That's evident when you look at the final day of a golf tournament and the last two groups coming down the stretch, the tournament is usually won by the guy that doesn't overcurve his golf ball.
Right.
And the one that
that's
loses is overcurving the golf ball.
Yeah, exactly. Chuck, one of the things that has really, and there's been lots of discussion and debate in the golf industry here the last several years, and I think that I'm assuming you would agree with this as well, but there's a lot discussion about the decline in numbers and not as many people getting out. There's a lot of factors involved. Some of it is economic, of course. Some of it is just a timing issue. People don't have as much time. They're busy with other activities and that. But I think also, too, there's been a level and growing frustration among the average golfers out there of just not either getting bombarded with too much information and not getting what they feel the information that they need in order to become. They want to go out and have fun, number one, but they also want to be able to improve. What are some of the reasons that you've seen or just based on your experience over the last few years as to why that's not happening, why so many people are still handicaps are still not really getting much better for the average golfer? Why do you think there's that level of frustration? What's happening that you think is causing that?
Well, I think a couple of things. Golf courses are getting tougher because the average player wants to play the toughest golf course from the back tees. They don't take into consideration you're going to lose 35, 40 golf balls doing that. So now that brings in frustration. It takes forever to play, and it's expensive. Golf is not an easy game, a few years ago, according to the National Golf Foundation, only 27% of all golfers took lessons. Well, I just read something the other day where it's now down to 13%. So my question would be, why did that drop 14%? And the answer is players aren't getting any better, by and large, or they don't feel like they are. So they don't want to spend their money on a golf lesson. I mean, when you go out and somebody wants $200 an hour to teach you golf, you're not going to affect that person very much unless they already have the money to do that. Number one, and then commit to a long-term program, because that's throwing $200 out for an hour. And are you going to get any better? You might, but you've seen it. I've seen it. Everybody's done it.
Yeah.
The player does exactly what you need for them to do. They're hitting great shots when they're with you. They leave, and all of a sudden they can't find the golf ball again.
Yeah.
So now we're the ones that get bad mouthed. Okay. Hey, I went to him. I spent $200 and I'm playing like crap. So. Yeah.
Well,
but years ago, over in Destin, I was doing a golf school. The guy was terrible. I mean, he could make contact, but the ball never went where he wanted it to go. And, after the first day, he said, well, let me show you how I used to do it. And I go, and his name was Fred. I said, Fred, if you were doing it so well the other way, why did you even come here with it? So, you're wasting your money. If you want to go home, go home. But if you want to improve, we need to improve these things. So when we're teaching here at our locations in Kansas City, we do not put everybody in a cookie-cutter mold. All of our players have different-looking swings. I don't care what they do if they can control their golf ball, and that's the ultimate judge is how you control your golf ball.
You raise an interesting point, and I want maybe we can expand a little bit more on this. You talked about not sort of putting them in this cookie-cutter mold, and I equate it to one swing doesn't fit all, much like one size doesn't fit all. And one of the things that I've noticed, there's been a trend here over the last couple of decades, is this sort of emergence, if you will, of trying to get everybody to swing and look the same. And if you look over history, and you know this as well, Chuck, we're kind of in the same realm of I know I've got a full head of gray hair here myself, so I'm getting up there too. But Chuck, one of the things that I've noticed here, when I look back at some of the players like Nicholas, the Trevinos, the player Chichi Rodriguez, who used to bend the ball just about more than I think anybody I could ever imagine. And the one thing that was always uniquely interesting about each of the players, besides their individual personalities, is they all had different looking swings. Again, their fundamentals were consistent and did a lot of the same things, but their swings were different. Now everybody kind of looks the same, with a few exceptions. You got Jim Furyk and a few others out there, Zach Johnson, as you mentioned. But everybody seems to be trying to mold in that same swing pattern. And I'm just wondering if this is what's happening on the amateur level, that everybody's trying to emulate who they're watching on TV instead of sticking to their own game and sticking to their own abilities. You know, I may not be able to swing like Tiger Woods, or I may not be able to swing like Nick Faldo did, or somebody, just because I'm the same height or similar height. So how do we sort of reprogram, if you will, those golfers out there and get them back in tune, and get them out there getting lessons? We want them out there to have those lessons, but at the same time, we want to sort of deprogram them and say, look, you're not so-and-so and you're not so-and-so. So what do we have to do to get this job done?
Well, and that's what we do with our physical assessments. We'll get players coming in trying to do something, and we'll ask them, why are you trying to do this? And they'll give us whatever answer they give us. And then by the time we put them through their physical assessment, I can tell you I've been assessing these golfers for almost 30 years now, putting through these assessments. And in 30 years, I've had one player that actually swung the way his body dictated. One. Everybody else was trying to copy what somebody else was doing. And of course, it was ruining their golf game because they physically weren't built nor had the range of motion, flexibility, etc., to copy that player. So a key piece is finding out what the player can and can't do.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you know, I think a lot of people, and I would say this to those listening to the program tonight, that maybe have sort of fallen into that trap. They've been out, maybe they've taken lessons before, and perhaps for one reason or another weren't successful at it. I encourage you to go and do it again. I encourage you to go out. But the number one thing that I would say first and foremost, as you've indicated here tonight, Chuck, is you need to go out and make sure you have a proper assessment done. Make sure that the coach or teacher professional that you're working with does that proper assessment. And it's not something that's going to take 5 or even 10 minutes. It may take 20 or 30 minutes, depending on what they're looking at. It may take even a little bit longer, but it's well worth it. And make sure also, too, that you go out and you interview some of these guys and gals before you actually commit to anybody, and kind of get a feel and make sure that you're going to have, your personalities are going to gel, number one. There's nothing worse than getting, and it happens. I mean, let's be honest. Some coaches have different styles, and everybody is different, as you said. So, you have to go out and almost treat it like a job interview and go and talk to a few different professionals and find somebody that you kind of gel with a little bit. And I think you'll have an easier transition as well. But that's something I think you're right in saying that. I think that's a problem that has been going on is people are trying to emulate somebody else. And excuse me, pardon me. And it's just not going to work out 9 times out of 10.
No, and our guys, Brendan Cooper and Tony Trace, I mean, everybody here is on the same page. And again, we don't try to put everybody into the same mode or the same model. What we try to do, again, is once we get their assessment, we work on the thing that their body wants to do instead of them trying to do things that they think they should do. And once we get that in place, I mean, we spend the majority of our time, with these players, just teaching them and training them how to control, that club face and control that golf ball. So, we spend a lot of time on course, putting the ball in different situations, having them hit different shots, and then asking them, okay, now out of these shots, let's say we put 3 balls in a particular line and have them hit 3 different shots. Which one of those has the highest success ratio? That's the shot you want to play, Which one of these are you the most comfortable doing every time? That's the one you want to play. So don't try to pull off these miracle Phil Mickelson shots, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to do that. So, everything has, there's probably 10 ways to hit a bunker shot, greenside bunker shot.
Right.
Well, and every player has a way that's more comfortable for them and it works. That's the one they need to know. They don't need to know all the rest of them until they move up to the level of a player that might require to hit 2 or 3 different kinds of bunker shots.
Yeah, and something that you alluded to earlier as well, and I think this is so important, and I think people misunderstand what is really being spoken here, but fitness is also important. I mean, everybody's flexibility is different, and I've had on the show here a number of times Bob Foreman, who is a certified fitness instructor, and he's very well known. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but he talks about, he does a lot of physical assessments of golfers, and he talks about on the program and also on his website about the abilities of individuals of not being able to be able to turn as effectively as they could because their muscles are tight or not, or they're restricting themselves. So, obviously if you're getting somebody out there that's trying to do things that is beyond their abilities, it's going to create and fester up other issues as well. And you obviously see that when you're working with them through the 5 keys, correct?
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people tell me, well, I can't turn 90 degrees. And by doing that very simple drill we talked about first, where they stand straight up, feet apart, arms crossed, turn your upper body, to the right, and then tilt forward. I've not had anybody that can't turn 90 degrees. So they think they can't, but once I show them that drill, they go, oh, I can do that. Yeah, you can. But you can't doing it the way that you're doing it. So then we have to educate them on how to turn their body.
Yeah. Well, it boils down. Education's a great way to put it, Chuck. Is we have to educate, and I think, in recent times, I think again, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I think there has been so much emphasis on technology here lately. We see it all the time, talking about it, and it certainly has its place, and it's a valuable tool for the coaches and for the teachers out there. But I think we've got to be careful that we don't get the students caught so much up in the numbers and things like that. They're forgetting the basics and the fundamentals that we talked about here tonight. And that's really, why I keep emphasizing it over and over again, because I think that there are still a lot of people out there that are doing it on the student side and even on the teacher side. And I think that we have to sort of come together and realize, and the other thing too, Chuck, that we haven't really said, and that I want to add to something that you said earlier, about somebody coming and paying out money for a lesson. I don't care what teacher you go to anywhere in the world, the best of the best, you can go to 10 of the best teachers, and even if they did it for free, it doesn't matter what they show you. If you don't go out and put it into practice and practice those fundamentals that they're teaching you, you're not going to improve. You might see a modest improvement, as you said, while you're working with the teacher, but in the second they leave, they can't find the ball. And that's because they're not practicing. And that's something that people have to make that commitment. They have to get out there and practice, and they have to practice with purpose.
Well, we use Edify, and we upload a lot of stuff up there for our players, drills, PDFs, text documents, videos, all kinds of things. And, when you have a player that commits to, we do long-term things. We do very few one-offs that we call them. We do 3, 6, 9, and 12-month programs. You have a player sign up for one of your programs that, number one, it is expensive, but it's cheaper than doing the, paying by the hour on the one-offs. But when you have a player doing that, and then you load all their information up along with their drills, how to set up their drill station, their practice, and everything else, and you check up there a month later, and they still have not even logged in. That tells me that their motivation is, not great. So, people are not motivated to practice. They'll go hit balls, but that's not practicing. That's just hitting balls.
Yeah.
So they're not motivated to do the practice that needs to be done.
And exactly, and they wonder why they don't improve. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier on the panel discussion tonight, Chuck, was we talked about, the raking and hitting motion that we see so many times on the practice tee. They'll lay down a bucket of balls and they're just raking one ball after another. And, they might be hitting some great shots, maybe, 2 out of 5 shots might be decent. That keeps them coming back every week. But then when they get out in the golf course, everything just kind of, that range game, if you will, doesn't transcend to the golf course because they don't really They're not really practicing the fundamentals so much as just trying to see what they can, where the ball's going. And they're not really focusing on practicing the things. And that's what I said about earlier, practicing with purpose. And they need to simulate. Here's something else too that Chuck and I think you'd probably agree with this as well. We talked about you talked about doing some of these longer term scenarios with some of your students and things like that. Here's a great thing for those of you listening out there that I'm sure, Chuck, you would agree with. You have a lot of great online tools. If you don't have time every week to get out there 2 or 3 times or even one time every single week, there's a lot of drills that you can do in your home.
Exactly. I mean, if you would spend 15 minutes a day in front of a mirror at your house, you don't have to go to the range but once a week.
Yeah. I remember the late Nick Westlock. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He was an amateur out of Nick the Wedge. Well, I knew Nick very, very well, and I used to sometimes sit in with him and Mo Norman, of course. Both have since left us, but something that I used to, and this went well into his golden years, but Nick used to sit in his chair when he wasn't on the golf course, when he was at home in front of his television. He always had a club nearby, and he'd be working on his grip, and he'd be, doing things. He would occasionally, he'd get up and he'd stand behind his chair, and he'd, turn his, just like you were saying, he would stand straight up and he would turn, and that was well into his 90s that he still did those drills. And the reason he played as well, and the reason why, so many great players is they practice, and they practice even some of the basic things, but it's repetitiveness. And a lot of amateurs think, well, I don't have time to go to the range, or I don't have time to go and do this. There's a lot of things that you can do right in your own home.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of the tour players, a lot of them at tournaments, they are in front of their mirror in their hotel room doing things at night, as well as being on the practice tee. And, from when I was out there working with a lot of players, one thing I noticed was they would practice in front of a mirror because the mirror would act like a video camera. Yep. And then they would take it to the range to see how it affected the ball flight, their swing changes. Then they would take it to the course to see how it affected their scoring. So that was always the sequence. And they still do that today. I mean, if you go to a tour event Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every player out there has their training aids lined out, and that's what they're doing. They're working on their training station. And, as hard as we try to get people to do that, people will sit there and tell us that they want to get better, but at the end of the day, they're not willing to take time to do that and do what's necessary. I mean, tomorrow for our webinar, it's actually called "Are You Committed to Change?" Because how many people have told you that they want to change, they want to get better, they want to do this, but they're not willing to commit to doing what it takes to doing it? Right.
Well, it's like that old adage: if you keep doing the same things day in, day out, you got to expect the same result. So if you're not practicing and you're not doing things, and you're shooting in the high 80s or 90s or even not even breaking 100, and you're not willing to make changes that are necessary in order to help you shoot those lower scores, then you're just going to keep shooting the same scores. And every once in a while, you might connect the dots in the right way, and you might shoot a lower number. But more often than not, you're not going to. And this is what the problem is. And I think, again, Chuck, part of the misconception with a lot of players is they say, well, I don't have the resources, or I can't practice like a tour pro does. I just don't have that much time to do it. And that may be true. But there, as you just indicated as well, if you've got 15 minutes a day, there's a lot of things that you can do. And for very little money, you can go and get a mirror. If you don't happen to have a full-length mirror, you can go to your local hardware store for a few dollars and get a full-length mirror and lean it up against a wall, maybe down in your rec room or basement if you've got it, or in a family room somewhere out of the way. And you can practice some of these different positions that we're talking about without even ever leaving the comfort of your home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they're very simple drills you can do. I mean, years and years and years ago, this is back in the 70s, Homer Kelly with a golfing machine used to call it swinging a rope. And so everybody started, all of us started swinging ropes to get a feel of timing and a sense of how the pressure is moving back and forth. We have all of our people do that. They all have rope. They all do it. And when you put it on technology and measure it, for example, what's called their trace, their center of pressure trace, when they're swinging the rope, the trace is absolutely perfect. And as soon as they get a golf club in their hand, their trace goes bizarre. So, you know, you have to keep training yourself. I mean, if you learn how to do something over and over and over correctly, or even incorrectly, you're going to do whatever it is you just practiced 1,000 times. So when you practice, you need to make sure you're practicing correctly, not just flinging away at golf balls.
Yeah, and that's what unfortunately happens too many times. Chuck, let's help some of the golfers here. How can they get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you or working through Chuck Evans Golf, or they want to maybe sign up? How can they go about doing that? Where do they go to get the information?
They just go to the website. Yeah, they just go to the website, chuckevansgolf.com. They can read everything they would like to find out there. We have tons of articles and videos on there for them to watch. We also have an online scheduler there where they can click and select whatever they want from our instructional menu. They can also sign up for our monthly newsletter we put out, which also has instructional features as well as videos in it.
Fantastic. And Chuck, you mentioned here just a moment ago about a webinar that you're doing tomorrow. Is this an open webinar, or is this something that is closed?
They sign up through Medicus. Actually sponsors it. It's up on Facebook right now.
Okay.
And it's called Medicus Webinar. So they can sign up for that. It's at 3 o'clock Central Time tomorrow. It's always on Friday. It's always at 3 o'clock.
Very good. Well, Chuck, I want to thank you very much for taking time out and talking with me tonight and letting the listeners, hear from really, as far as I'm concerned, one of the true veterans of the golf game. You certainly have done a lot to help grow this game, and I know you'll continue to do that. And I know you're taking a little rest now to recover. And are you able to? I'm not sure how long ago this happened, but you have a few more weeks of recovery.
Yeah, I had surgery 3 weeks ago, and I've got 2 months of rehab. So and PT. Now tomorrow's webinar, I will not be dancing like I normally do. That will be Brenda. That'll be Brendan's job. So
right. So you're on a little bit of a hiatus in somewhere. You're still working. See, that's the thing I like is you're still working regardless. So you won't be swinging the club as normal, but you can still.
I won't be swinging the club at all. Yeah, I won't be swinging the club at all
exactly.
until October, and I'll be swinging it in October. I'll be doing the Golf Channel morning drive 2 days, October 27th and 28th. And we'll put 10 to 12 clips up there as well for people to look at.
So guys and gals, make sure you go to chuckevansgolf.com and lots of good information there. And Friday at 3 p.m. Central, there'll be the Medicus webinar. You can learn about that. Now, is there a link or something on your website to that as well that they can follow through if they're not?
It's up on your Facebook. Just click on Medicus webinar and it gives you a registration link there.
Okay.
And it's free.
Okay, Perfect. So there's no excuse for anybody listening to the program out there. If you want to improve your golf game, you can certainly learn from one of the best, Mr. Chuck Evans. Chuck, thank you very much for coming on Golf Talk Live. Always enjoy when you come on here, and I hope I can twist your arm a few times and get you to come on a few more Coach's Corner panels. We certainly love to have you on, and you always have an open invitation to come here.
Yeah, it'd be great. And, we ought to do – John Dunnigan and I ought to do one together. So that'd be a great
well, you know what? John, I'll tell you what. I want you, now that you're sort of on a short hiatus until October when you start doing the real work, just kidding. I want you to reach out to John for me as well. I tried getting him on this year's Coach's Corner panel, but I would love to have the two of you guys on to do a segment together. So, let John know that he's got an open invitation as well, and we'll get you back here real soon.
Sounds good, Ted. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it as always.
All right, thank you. It's me that gets the enjoyment. Have a great evening, Chuck. Great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
All righty, see ya.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that was my very special guest, Chuck Evans. Great teach professional, been around for a long, long time. Always does a great job, and thoroughly enjoy listening to his insight, as I'm sure you did as well. Again, Chuck Evans is the Executive Director of Medicus Golf, as well as the owner of course, Chuck Evans Golf. And you go to chuckevansgolf.com if you're interested in working with Chuck and his group and learning more about what he has to offer, and he's got a lot of information. And just once again, if you're interested in participating and learning more through the Medicus webinar, go onto Facebook and just type in the search key, type in Medicus webinar, and there's a form there that you can join in, and it is, as he indicated, free. So make sure you do that. Again, I want to thank my special guests, Matthew Cook and David Lewis Maroney, for doing a great job on the Coach's Corner tonight. And again, of course, my special guest, Chuck Evans, as always. Thank you for joining me. And I look forward to talking with you guys and just helping to grow this game. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the listeners worldwide for faithfully tuning into Golf Talk Live each week. I truly do have a great enjoyment and have a great amount of pleasure of having a number of highly talented coaches like Chuck and David and Matthew come on, teaching professionals, authors, entrepreneurs, and all of the other good people in golf for stopping by Golf Talk Live. And it's really through their participation and guest appearances that have helped to make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. A special thank you to some of the sponsors and supporters of the program. Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. If you're interested in getting a copy of the guide, go to southcoastgolfguide.com. Lots of good information in there. And if you're interested in advertising in Jonathan's publication, go to southcoastgolfguide.com, or you can email Jonathan at southcoastgolfguide.com. Meredith Kirk, of course, from Meredith Kirk Golf. She was the 2014 Miss of South Carolina, but she's also a great instructor, did a lot of great work out in Myrtle Beach area. Make sure you go to meredithkirk.com and you can find out more information there. Thank you, as always, Meredith, for your support. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland for all of your help in spreading the word. Nikki, I'm going to try and get him on the show as well. Great professional. And Mr. Bernie Pinder, of course, from Ontic Golf, a great line of custom designed putters. Thank you for all of your continued support, Bernie. And Sean Kelly, of course, the owner of linkedgolfers.com, started out as a great golf group on LinkedIn, the largest group, in fact, and that's where we first met. And of course, he's brought that out of LinkedIn. It's of course still there, but he's brought it out onto the main web and under linkedgolfers.com. So make sure you go and visit his site. And thank you, Sean, for all of your continued support as well. That's linkedgolfers.com. And of course, last but not least, my good buddy, Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you, Peter, for all of the great work that you do to help grow the game. Great master club fitter and also a great teacher professional as well. Thank you, Peter, for all of your hard work and continued support of the program. And on behalf of me and the guys, I want to thank you. I will see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central right here on Golf Talk Live. Have a great weekend, everybody, and God bless.